Welcome back to The Verdict. Now, the conversation has shifted a bit to security, history of security and security on the day itself. Now, Prof, that's Professor Dinkalu now. We have about 3 profs,
yes,
tonight. Profs. Yes, you were making the point about the fact that security is a bit more complex than we see it tonight. Finish that point so we can move on.
Thank you very much, John. There are just some locations at the moment. I've already given you the number of polling units we've got in the country. It's 119,973 to be very exact. Now, some of those polling units are actually in places where nobody can go to at the moment for anything. In much of at least 5 local government areas in Zamfara State, you can't deploy anybody for elections. INEC is going to struggle to get any insurance company to give a policy to cover election its officers to organize elections in those places. In parts of Borno State, nobody is going to be able to be going to Baga to organize elections. Let's be clear. Or to Marte. Indeed, you may struggle to get anybody to organize elections in parts of Mongono. And it seems to me INEC has a responsibility to let us know of these 119,973 polling units, how many of them are in places where it is just practically impossible at the moment, given the security situation we've got, to get people to go to organize elections. Because okay, if Prof, we do that, we can deploy Section 26 of the Electoral Act.
Sorry, Prof, I'm going to allow us to let Mr. Uzi respond, because you know you've been bashing him about different things and all that. Mr. Uzi, and I'm going to throw this back to you. Prof talked about what's going to happen, in Abia, in Plateau, where, INEC offices have been raised, what's going to happen with those who had PVCs in there. And I know INEC has put a call out to say you need increased security of your facilities this period. But now you hear what Prof is saying about the difficulty to access certain areas. This is always an issue we hear. If they're not talking about difficulty to access the creeks, you're talking about difficulty to access areas where people have been displaced and etc. So, I mean, you have the stage, and you're going to tell us what your security architecture, that's the new word now, is right now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I must say that we operate in a security is one of the biggest challenges that we have in conducting elections in this country. Security, especially in the last electoral cycle, in the last few years, last 10 years especially. I think Prof. Fonikalo has traced the whole thing, and I think he did adequately. There's nothing more for me to add there. But I want to say that we were able to achieve some measure of success with the 2015 elections, even with the security challenges. The creeks were there. We get gunboats to escort materials and personnel up and down the creeks. It's not the best thing to do under the circumstances, but it's the reality of the situation. During the registration in Borno, for example, we cooperated with the Air Force. They had to airlift some of our materials and personnel to relevant registration points because they said it was too unsafe to go by road from point A to point B. So these collaborations are there. With the security of our offices, we've been discussing with the Inspector General of Police, and he did issue a statement yesterday to say that he has escalated security around our premises, all our premises, both local government and state offices, and all facilities that the Commission will use. Because without adequate security, then if the environment is not secure, people will not turn out. You're talking of voter turnout earlier. That is one of the reasons why some people are scared to turn out, because of security or insecurity, fears of insecurity. As for Plateau and the Abia, Isilango South local government, all the cars that were destroyed in the Isilango South local government have been replaced, and they've been sent to Abia for collection, and we will replace all the materials. But the one in Plateau State, a register was opened, and all persons who come to collect their PVCs, they were recorded, and their PVCs will be reprinted. So that we've already said in our statement.
So you mean you're going to reprint?
It will not affect elections.
Let's understand you properly. You're going to reprint PVCs for everybody who lost their PVC in Plateau. When would that happen? Within this week, or what's the plan?
Oh, the next 24 hours. We give a deadline that the REC, Resident Electoral Commissioner, should let us have that register. We build up the particulars, the VIN numbers, and those will be reproduced for all those who indicated interest to collect their PVCs today. That will be done.
And
it's already been done in Abia.
I mean, taking it from there, that is simply a manifestation of the security challenge that you face. But if you heard Professor Odinkalu there now, he mentioned a number of places where, you know, practically, in his view, it's difficult, if not outright impossible, to conduct elections in those geographical spaces as they are now. He mentioned some specific places in Borno. He mentioned some in Zamfara. And I'm sure that if we look at it, there may be some in other places where there are security challenges. What are the plans that INEC has for those areas and voters who are currently registered in those areas? Then I want you to touch on the issue of voting centers. Because we're talking about already established booths, polling units. But now INEC has also created some 57,000 additional voting points, as they are called. What's to happen with those?
Well, first of all, the issue of what Professor Nikal talked about, that is very disturbing. Yes, there are serious security threats. We assess the situation day in, day out, and we are in constant touch with those who have primary responsibilities to secure the environment. INEC doesn't have the capacity, it doesn't have the legal backing to secure environments, but it has to operate in a secure environment, and that's why we cooperate with the security agencies very, very closely. And there's a lot of intelligence gathering, a lot of work is being done, and we do take their advice and take their advice very seriously. So we're looking at every situation. There's no one-size-fits-all. We're looking at everything at every time, and we're in close contact with the security, all the security agencies that are relevant to this exercise.
How about the new polling points?
The polling units, oh, great. Yes. Basically, those voting points are where polling units are too large for efficiency's sake, too large to, voting between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. And if you have a polling unit with 2,000, 2,500 people, we just might not be able to service everybody in an efficient manner within the prescribed period. So we've decided to break those large polling units into create a voting point. There's still one unit, but we'll now create a voting point, which is another center within that unit for voting. So if there are 2,000 people in a place now, we might split it to like 3, 4, we have one polling unit and 3, 4 voting points, so that the maximum should have to be just 500 or thereabouts. So they break it for efficiency's sake. This has been shared with the political parties, and anybody who wishes can get a copy of it. But when we give registers, we break everything down and give it to political parties. And in the states,
before you go on, I also want you to touch on this. In one of your engagements with the political parties, I remember there were 2 or 3 or so of the parties which made mention of the fact that they needed to know how many of the 84 million people who registered to vote have collected their PVCs.
And we also asked for the number, and they were not sure.
That's it, and how many have not. Now, at that time, it was expected that this week, INEC would be able to provide that information after the collation. But with this 3-day extension, will you still be able to make that ahead of the election so that people can go home and say, look, this is the figure. If the votes exceed this number, then something has happened, as Professor Odinkalu said, between the voting, the collation, and the announcement.
And also to ask the question about how many, I mean, I know it's ending today, but how many PVCs are uncollected and how many you have right now? It's a question that I put to one of the INEC commissioners, National Commissioner. He was not able to answer. His response that day was, oh, I'm not too sure. So I know it's the last day, but will you be able to give us a figure we can work with?
No, I certainly cannot do that. This thing closed at about 6 p.m. today, and we don't have the figures from the field from our state offices yet, so I don't think anybody can hazard a guess.
But we will be able to get it sometime this week, at least before Saturday?
Oh, certainly. We promised that, and that has always been the case. In 2015, we gave the figures. And all the off-cycle governorship elections thereafter, we've given the figures. There's nothing unusual about that. When some of these people make a noise about it, we find it very intriguing, and I don't know why they do that, because we've always done so, and we promised to do so this time around. That's exactly what we've always done since.
But I think it's intriguing for a lot of people now because of the way they're seeing it go. They're wondering how many people have it. Don't be surprised now or intrigued. It's because the system hasn't quite worked the way it was supposed to work when it initially rolled out. So that's why we ask the questions that we ask.
How do you mean by that? What do you mean when you say the system hasn't worked?
I mean, for instance, the extension that you have now, that was not planned. At least I don't think it was. And then with all the challenges that have come up from the field with collection, that was not planned for either.
Sorry, we lost you there.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. When you said I should explain to you what I mean by the system hasn't worked the way it should, I have said that you were not, the extension that we have now till today was not planned because you assumed it would have been, the process would have finished. And also the kind of stories that we hear of PVC collection on the field might not have been planned by you initially.
Well, we do know as a fact that when you give deadlines in Nigeria, very often the people tend to, in many instances, wait till the last few minutes, the last few days to do. So there was a deluge of people. While the registration was going on since last year, most of our officers who were assigned the duty of giving cars to those who sought to collect had next to nothing doing. So you had people who sit down for hours and only give out 2 or 3 cars because only 2 or 3 people have come to collect. So I'm not, it's just a phenomenon that is not unusual. So in one sense, we gave some leeway. Look, if there's such a deluge or if there's such a way that too many people don't have their cars, then we'll make allowance for that. So that was factored into our planning process. And if it wasn't necessary, then we would have stopped on Friday. But with the pleas and with the feedback we're getting, we thought it was absolutely necessary that we extended that. That's why we did it.
All right, let's stay in Abuja, but this time let me go to Professor Maman and ask the question. This time, there have been issues about parallel lines running historically with security during elections. The laws stipulate that INEC is supposed to, the security agents are supposed to work under the direction of INEC if what they're doing is related to the elections. But most of the time, security agents take orders from their commanders, not from INEC. And INEC in itself sometimes has to simply just go along in order to ensure, as you pointed out earlier, some level of security for its officials and for its materials. Now, this time around, do we see a situation where that is changing? Do we have any record? Someone on the panel did make mention of the fact that the top security chiefs, the National Security Advisor and the Inspector General, have said, oh, this time we're going to be neutral and we're just going to play the role that we are allocated.
They're going to be friendly as well.
Yes, that was the Chief of Army Staff who said that the uniform is friendly and that, a few people didn't quite believe that. But now, do you see any evidence of that? Is there anything on ground showing that?
5 days away.
Well, once more, it's a very difficult job actually assigned to INEC when you ask them to take responsibility for security, control of the security. But I suspect the main reason for it is to ensure that the entire environment is demilitarized and the security people do not play an active role in the outcome of the elections. That is the sole reason for that. Now, for now, it's quite, one can say it's quite doable, but one has to wait for the D-Day. And it all depends on the environment of the election itself. Because if the environment is found to be calm and peaceful, then there will be no need for security people to come in a very visible way. And you remember, the military people have directed that no military personnel should appear in uniform around voting areas, and even generally, actually, except those who are on duty. And people should just go and vote. Even the military people should just simply go in mufti and go and do their elections and go away. So it all depends on the environment that is on ground on that day, because some of the areas which are identified to be a bit volatile may involve, greater visibility on the part of the security to ensure that the bad boys, the bad people do not take advantage of it. And we also must bear in mind some of the dangers of ballot snatching. This is part of the reason why security people need to be available and fairly visible, because
Professor Manuel, at that point I'm going to have to interrupt. I'm going to have to interrupt you. My apologies. We'll have to take this quick break again, and then when we come back, I'll allow you to conclude your thought. Then we'll go around the panel about this whole issue of the nexus between, security and INEC and how it plays out on the open field on the day of the poll. Please stay with us.